Business. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Council Business Planning Committee of the Whole. We have a new parish priest, and he always likes to tell a joke before. So I asked Julie if I could have the brevity, because everyone thinks that they have a bad day. So I'm just going to give you a little synopsis of my day. So I got to Unionville this morning, brand new appointment, rummaging around, getting the paperwork and everything. Closed the door, locked my truck from the side, from the door. Felt no keys. So I've locked my keys in my vehicle. So that's number one. Number two, as I'm driving home from Unionville, the heater on my truck goes up, up, up. I get to the top of the Skyway, the light comes on. Your vehicle's overheating, so you can't stop on the Skyway. That's risking sure death. So I coast down and I get to the little inspection station between Fruitland and 50 Road and pull over safely, and CA comes and rescues me for the second time that day. And then as I'm standing at the garage, I feel this drop and I think, is it raining? No, a seagull poops on me. Now I'm told that's good luck, so I'm going to take that into the meeting tonight, seeing we have 443 pages of agenda. So keep in mind what my day has been like when you think you're going to put your hand up and ask a question. So, Councillor McMillan sends his regrets tonight. So, the town staff we have in attendance tonight from the Chief Administration Office, we've got the CAO himself, Mr. Michael Kirkopoulos. On the, are we going to call that the staff desk? We've got Carrie Beatty, the Senior Communications Advisor. And in the bullpen, we have Mr. Paul Deaney, our Economic Development Officer. Corporate and Legislative Services right here in front of me. We've got Julie Kirkolos, the Town Clerk, and we've got Trish Sarnicki, the Deputy Clerk. From the Finance and Administration team, we've got Angela Stefani sitting there at the staff desk, Director of Finance and Administration. Terry Trawala, Associate Director of Finance. In the front row, you must be, you're first out of the bullpen, Terry, thank you. And we have Matt Guagnolo, our IT expert. Matthew, I saw you because you were helping. Okay. Matt's lurking about somewhere in case we have anything. Planning and Development, Ms. Kathleen Dale, Director of Planning and Development. And Mr. Matt Bruder, he's the left-hander coming out of the pen, Associate Director of Planning and Development. Public Works, Mr. David Graham, Director of Public Works. So, are there any declarations of interest this evening? I'm not going, you know who you are. I'm not going to introduce you one by one. You've got a nameplate in front of you. If you don't know who you are, have a look at it. Confirmation of agenda. Do any members have any changes to the order of business detailed in the agenda this evening? I see that. Okay. Okay. So we have an added closed session this evening. Okay. Delegations. We have no registered delegations this evening. Correspondence. We have no items of correspondence this evening. So, our first report, TR 18-20. Development charges updates. Are there any questions from committee members regarding this report? Yes, Mr. CAO.
Through Mr. Chairman, so staff have prepared a PowerPoint presentation to take committee through. Now, in light of your opening comments, staff can provide you a verbal update quickly, but we can also take you through that presentation should committee want to hear that presentation as well. Okay. So Ms. Stefani and Ms. Dale will be taking you through that presentation.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman. This presentation is really just complementing the report that we've already presented in front of you. Just so you're aware, I'm sure you already know, we have Watson here in the gallery, Gary Scanlon and Byron Tan to answer any technical questions you may have at the end of the presentation. And we also have SMT here to answer any questions if you have any questions on the capital projects. So just what are development charges? Just a reminder, they're fees that are put in place for growth-related capital projects to help us fund those costs. It pays for infrastructure and facilities to maintain the current service levels that we have. And the principle of development charges is growth pays for growth, and that burden isn't put on the current taxpayer. So our process, we started this process back in 2017. Hopefully we'll be finishing it this fall. We started the collection of data through the spring and winter with staff. Watson did the calculations in the winter, spring. We did a few revisions as we went through this. We had stakeholder consultation October to summer 2018. And then the background study was issued in May 17. The public meeting was held with council in June 18, presenting the first draft of those numbers. We heard back from the development community, took those numbers back, ended up doing some amendments to that draft study, and did an addendum back that was issued September 7th this year. We had a follow-up stakeholder meeting September 13th to advise them of the revised number, and then now we're here in front of council for your consideration. Council bylaw adoption, we're looking for October 1st, indexing fees January 1st with implementation of new rates from March 1st, 2019. The calculation of the development charges, this is just a simplified version. Identify the amount, type, and growth location. Identify servicing needs to accommodate the growth. Identify any capital costs, so this is what staff has done. Provide the service needs to meet the needs of the growth in the growth in the community. Then any revenues are deducted. We had to deduct grants or subsidies that we may be receiving. Benefit to existing is not funded through development charges, so only growth is funded through development charges. Some areas have, in the soft services, have a 10% statutory deduction that has to come off that growth-related amount. And then the amounts are not to exceed the 10-year horizon, and any reserve funds that we're holding are also deducted. The net costs are then allocated between residential and non-residential, and then divided by the growth.
So under the Development Charge Act, there's actually a number of what we call mandatory exemptions. Those are exemptions that you have to provide in your bylaw. They include if you have an industrial building and you're doing an expansion, so the first 50% is exempted from development charges. So that's a one-time industrial addition. As well, if you have a residential use, you can add up to 2 apartments, but you can't double the size of the home. You can have one additional unit in medium and high density, so this would be things like townhouses and apartments. And then as well, upper and lower tier governments and school boards are also exempt from paying development charges. Under your current bylaw, you do have some discretionary exemptions, and there's also some new ones proposed. So under your existing development charges bylaw, a place of worship, a cemetery, or a burial ground, those are currently exempt from paying development charges. Agricultural buildings are currently exempt from development charges. And if you do a farm help house within an agricultural building, that is currently exempted from development charges under your bylaw. Some of the new exemptions that staff are recommending is the first 750 square meters, which is roughly 7,500 square feet, of an agricultural produce processing building or produce warehouse on land zone agriculture. And in one of the later slides, we will explain that the intent of that is to promote agriculture in the town. So that's the reason for that. Granny flats, which are temporary structures, those are proposed to be exempted from development charges. Parking structures, because you just park your car, you don't live there, so there's no population-related growth. Affordable housing projects where you're getting an allocation from the region, those would be exempt. Canopies, so an example, if you put a canopy over a gas bar, or you have a winery and you have an outdoor patio and you put a canopy in, those would be exempted. as well as agricultural research uses, so things that are happening at the Vineland Research Station, for example.
So this is just providing council an overall snapshot of what the new proposed DC charges look like. So one of the changes that we've made is we've gone from residential to non-residential, but the residential used to be one number, and now it's broken into commercial, industrial, and institutional, and Kathleen will provide more information later on through the presentation on that. But if you go to the second to last line, you'll see our grand total municipal and urban. The very last one is Camden, but the one above that is the one that's the rest of the town. So you'll see the new rate for single and semi is 22,603, and that's the one that we're going to highlight right now in this presentation. If you go to the next slide, you'll see right now our current single and single detached is 15,699. That's where we are now under the current for urban area. In May, we presented to you, in June, we presented to you 25,196. That was our first draft. We went back after hearing what the development community and hearing their concerns, and we revisited the study, went through it again, and ended up at 22,603. This, I think Kathleen was going to talk about this one now. This is the industrial, commercial, and institutional.
Okay, so in regards to the non-residential charges, currently the municipality has what they call one non-residential charge. So that non-residential charge right now covers commercial, industrial, and institutional. In order to align this more with what the region is doing, what is being proposed is a rate for commercial, industrial, and institutional. So what will happen if this is approved is the industrial rate will go down, the commercial rate will go up, and the institutional rate will go up a little bit. The reasoning for that is development charges are based on expected number of employees, and you tend to have less employees per square meter or per square foot in an industrial building than you would have in a commercial building.
So we just wanted to give you a little bit of history of where our development charges were and where we're going. So for the last 10 years, I think we started in 2000, well, we did start in 2009 at just over 14,000, and now we're just finishing at the 15,699. So we really haven't seen much growth in our development charges fee, and the main drivers of that are, well, they've remained flat, even though, so really not keeping pace with the cost of construction. Lincoln has a much higher growth rate than most municipalities in the region, requiring a significant number of growth-related projects to keep up with the development. Anticipated growth in the next 5 years has required designs to be placed so development can proceed. And then project costs have been adjusted to reflect a more realistic cost, and I think we've seen that in our budgeting, and we're trying to reflect that in the DC study as well to ensure that we're capturing all the costs of the projects. And again, although we've captured all these capital projects in this report, these projects will still be brought forward for approval through the capital budget process, and the timing may change, but we have provided those timings in the study as well. And lastly, Lincoln has 7 urban areas: Beamsville, Vineland, Vineland East, Jordan Station, Prudhoms, and Camden. So we're not one continuous urban area like you will see Grimsby to our west or Pelham to the south. We're not like those, so yes, our development charges, we're incurring higher costs because we have to maintain 7 different hamlets. I think that's you.
Okay. So as part of this process, staff did take into account the comments from the development community. So some of the ways that the development community's concerns were addressed is town staff did take a look at all of the project costs, some of the timing of the projects. This resulted in deferring some of the projects that reasonably were not intended, would not likely happen within the 5-year term of the development charge study, and also did some cost adjustments. Staff are recommending a deferral for the bylaw to come into effect to March the 1st, 2019. So this allows 5 months for the development community to adjust. We do expect there's going to be a lot of permits issued in the fall, and there are a lot of pre-sales that a lot of the builders and developers have done. By deferring it, it allows for some adjustment for the builders for the charges to come into effect at a later date. We also have some community improvement plans currently in place that do allow for reductions in your development charges if you meet the criteria in those community improvement plans. And there are some possible future new community improvement plans that council may be considering in the future. As I mentioned before, there's an exemption proposed of the first 750 square meters to support farm diversification in the community. The other thing too that's very important, because we always get developers saying, well, your bylaw says this and your bylaw says that. So one of the things that we wanted to make sure is that our definitions aligned with the regional definitions so that there's consistency in the interpretation. And we feel that the bylaw that's before committee tonight provides a balance between the needs of the development community, but also the desire so that you're not burdening existing taxpayers.
Is there any questions?
No, it's on. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Where in the process does a development need to be to fit into the old rates comparatively to the new rates? Like at what stage of construction?
So development charges are collected when we issue building permits. So you have to pay your development charges before you get a building permit issued.
Okay.
So it's based on the issuance of a building permit.
Okay. So moving forward from that, how many developments do you foresee being, I don't want to use the word caught, but in a spot where they may not be able to get their building permits issued in time to conform with the March 1st date? Or do you foresee a lot of them or not a lot of them? Or like, cause you have a better idea of how many developments are out there and what stage they're at from a standpoint of getting towards their building permits?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, we actually, that was one of the things that staff actually did look at. We looked at all of the developments that were in process and when we anticipated they would go forward. We do expect that based on a number of subdivision agreements that have currently been approved, a number of site plans that have been approved or very close to being approved, that there's going to be a lot of those permits issued before that March 1st deadline. There will be some developments that will get caught if we use the March 1st deadline. I can probably, if you like, I can give you some examples if that would help. So for example, if we look at the Vista Ridge subdivision, currently phase 1 is going to go ahead. They're doing their servicing now, so they potentially could get building permits for a good portion of phase 1 prior to the March 1st deadline. But for Vista Ridge phase 2, they definitely won't be in place to get building permits, before the March 1st deadline. So that's an example where their first phase, they would likely be able to get a good portion of their permits before that date, but for their second phase, which is much further, a lot more work to be done, would be caught in that process.
Okay, so do you feel, through you, Mr. Chair, so you feel we're in a kind of happy balance place for most of these folks?
I think that was through you, Mr. Chairman. That was part of having the meetings with the development community and looking at what was in process. And we do know that with a lot of the developments, even though they may not take out a building permit till say October 1st or November 1st, they've pre-sold a lot of those units probably 6 months ago when they first got their initial approval. So we wanted to make sure a lot of those ones weren't caught. So I think we did, to the best of our ability, try and create a balance, accommodating the development community, but also looking at the financial aspect of the municipality.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, mine's on. Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to our delegation. So, just doing some quick math here in my head. We're looking at a 40% increase in DC charges for residential development within the community, or approximately. Where is that putting us compared to the rest of Niagara at this point? And the question is that we've always been relatively high compared to other municipalities down and through the Niagara area. So, are we putting ourselves in some sort of a different category, I guess, when this is all said and done?
I don't have those numbers with me, but that does put us at the highest level against all the other municipalities in the Niagara region. I know Pelham has just done theirs, and I believe they just finished under 18,000 for their area. I believe there are a few other municipalities that are getting ready to go. I think Watson could answer those questions as to who's prepared to move forward with the next round, but we would be the highest in the region. I think, though, as well, is because we are one of the first out of the gate as well.
Okay. And yeah, I bet you the development community was pretty excited about a 40% increase. So I have a few concerns about the overall on this. I'm concerned on a few items that have gone on with this as we're looking at it. Number one, let's take a look at the agriculture. We're basically stating that we're going to be providing sort of a pretty substantial subsidy right off the bat with agriculture places, and we're also going to be putting in place SIPs for these things as well. At least I believe we're going down the road with agriculture SIPs as well. So it's kind of the cake and eating it too, I think, with some of those items. I'll have some comments about the capital project list in a little bit. I think I was back and forth with Mr. Koppelus today on that. I didn't like the piece of the motion that went on with that, but anyway, this is a pretty substantial change, and we got to be careful about putting our municipality in a situation where we're putting ourselves out of the game with these things. I mean, maybe it's as simple as, well, they're going to come, they're going to develop anyway, but I'm not sure that this is sending a right signal back in and through. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There we go.
No, go ahead. I don't know why mine, okay, thank you very much. I don't know why that happened. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. On page italics 2, under the area rating, I'd like a little bit more information about area-specific charges. It appears as though you're saying that we must consider it, but it doesn't mean that we must implement. Am I correct? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, Mary Easton, could you tell me what page you're on?
It's under the executive summary.
Oh, it's in your report.
1 minute. Would you mind rephrasing the question for me, or asking the question?
Under 3A, it speaks to area rating. It says council must consider the use of area-specific charges. Is that a change in policy, or you're not saying that we must implement area-specific charges. I would just like more information about that.
Through the chair, this is one of the new provisions under Bill 73 when they made the changes to the Act. They want councils to turn their minds to the issue of area rating. It's not a mandatory thing. It's one thing, though, that they want councils to do. So it's not mandatory, and you just need a resolution. Do you want to stay with the municipal wide, or do you want to do area-specific charges? I think when we did that workshop, I guess probably about six months now, we chit-chatted about if it's the softer services, the non-water wastewater, I wouldn't recommend doing area-specific, because it, just without going into gory details, it would mean that a lot of money would be not collected from development. It would be shifted over to the property tax base, the way the Act is set up. The only thing where you probably got the flexibility is on water and sewer. But then I guess the issue is you may end up with, in Beamsville, a lot of the services are put into place already, but then you have new areas such as Prudhome's, and you have a lot of services that have to go. So you'd end up with a very small charge here, very large charge there, and they're all competing in the same market. So it's a policy some municipalities consider, but the trend is going to really, for the most part, municipal wide now, just having one averaged charge.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, when would you like us, I'm sorry. I have a question. I just have one question about the list, really. Do you want to entertain those now, or do you want to wait for a bit? Well, I was curious about any discussion that might have taken place about Camden and water. It's come up a few times in the last few weeks. I didn't know whether that was part of the discussion, I guess, through you to the presenters. Was there a discussion about that?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the discussion for water in Camden wasn't discussed as part of the DC study, as it would be covering the existing growth there and not new growth. But Mr. Graham may be able to provide additional comments on that.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, it wasn't included in the development charge study. Currently, the servicing in Camden has been approved to be with cisterns. So that would be a different concept to consider for servicing in Camden.
Okay, and so, Mr. Chairman, is it because it's expected that the development there now and what's being approved is essentially the way it's going to be probably for the next 20 years or more? I mean, there must have been some parameters that you used to make that decision.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the servicing, there was a water and wastewater servicing study done for Camden probably about 3 years ago, and the preferred solution for water servicing at that time was for cisterns, private cisterns,
Right.
for Camden. So that's been the decision made to date for servicing Camden.
Okay. So any businesses any expanding business opportunities along Camden Road, was that included in that decision?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that would have been looked at based on the land use for the hamlet of Camden when that was reviewed about 3 years ago now.
Okay, I just want to be clear about this so I can put it to rest. So if there is a CIP for agriculture, does it then become part and parcel of the discussion then? Regardless of the outcome, would it be included in a discussion of CIP?
Or do you want to answer?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, why don't I take a stab at this? So as it relates to Camden and CIPs, I don't think a CIP would capture this particular element in terms of water service. I think in the past we've had these conversations on area rating. Some municipalities do area rating, some do not. I think there's been a past position of this council and of the community as it relates specifically to water and to Camden. That is not to say that in the future we can't have a subsequent conversation that looks at, you know, what is the appropriate model should council want us to explore something specific to Camden. Right now, and the model that I think's been in place in the past has been if someone was to want water, for example, Camden, we would apportion that to the residential or to the residents, you know, within that particular area. Again, some municipalities are looking at area rating, some are not. Some folks are in favor of area rating, others are not. There's pros and cons to both. Water is one of those unique basic necessities that I personally, from the perspective of my role, look at it as essential, look at as something we need to explore as we move forward. But absolutely, there's significant costs to water and to running services. And the broader conversation is what supplementary development needs to occur to make the provision of water something that becomes less cost prohibitive and more revenue generating. So a complex conversation that we probably at some point need to have, but I would say at this point, to answer your specific question, a agricultural CIP won't address a Camden water situation.
So I'm not talking about water within the hamlet. I'm pretty clear that, you know, the area rating has always been the recommendation. But if we're looking at holistically at services for the community, and you see that there's industrial development, agricultural development, I mean, in that area, then what's our holistic approach to providing water to agriculture? I mean, we're still talking about residential here, but I don't get the sense that there's really an opportunity to talk about a holistic approach to water, because those businesses would be paying for it through their DC charges. We could leave it. I understand it's a complicated subject, but we don't seem to be making very much progress. This is a very comprehensive report. I was looking for it in the report because I felt that we were moving pretty progressively on this. Maybe others might have some ideas on it to help me with this, but I thought this would have been the time that it might have come up. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Through Mr. Chairman, I think a couple of comments I'll make. One is we need to involve the region in this conversation. There are some limitations outside of the urban area, and I think that's some of the challenges we find ourselves in some of our agriculture areas, and we're experiencing that now as certain developments come to the table. So definitely something that I think we can, we can come back to committee with, we can come back to council with, I think both from an educative standpoint as well as maybe from a policy change perspective. But the Green Belt is another piece of legislation that within the rural agricultural areas that makes it a little more difficult, a little more complex to address the water problem, but definitely a conversation we need to be having, especially if we're looking at agricultural related industrial parks and the attraction of business, albeit agricultural related business, and their need for water servicing.
Right. So, Mr. Chairman, I will speak again with your indulgence. This is exactly what I thought we were attempting to do, because the region policy is very backward, and we all know that. So I don't know where if we don't start that discussion in a document like this, where do we begin it? Because they're not budging at all. And therefore, we're not able to make the progress that we should. So we can't have a discussion. It would be like having a discussion about gas, and there's no gas availability. So I'll just leave that. I think it's time to start having more vigorous discussions on these things.
I'm on. Beautiful, beautiful.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. You know, reading through this, and I'm on the staff comments, and bear with me. I'm gonna walk through this. So one item that was raised was the balance required to ensure. Maybe this speaks to Councillor Foster's line of questioning. Was the balance required to ensure that rates are reflective of the development occurring and what comprises that, and on the other side, the importance of economic growth and health, which needs to see industrial, commercial, and residential growth occur, but that can't be deterred by fees that increase to a point of unaffordability. So when I read that, you know, to me, it's what will the market bear? You know, really, what we're trying to get to is that point where we're going to maximize our take from that, but yet not push the developers away. My question through maybe to the consultant is, so how do you arrive at that? How do you get, and you know, you've got 15,000, I think 15,900 today, and you're taking it to 23,000. What are some of the variables that you look at when you're going to take it? And I understand, you know, and I see this in my day job, you know, years and years and years of flat. We're not moving it. You know, I hope it's not we're trying to catch up, all of it. I hope there is something behind the numbers that we can articulate to the developers to say X went up, Y went up, you know, and now we're, yeah, maybe there's a little bit of catch up, but now here, and this is a realistic number. Because, you know, when you look at our town, we don't have a lot of opportunity for development. So all the more reason we want to maximize our return on that opportunity. But help me to understand how you jumped from 15.9 to 23.
Through the chair. In part, it's the listing of the different services that we're providing. For example, with roads, you can see that roads increased from $6,600 to $9,000. So it's one of the larger components of the charge, and it's reflective of, you know, with the additional traffic, and then with Prudhome's, there's a number of additional servicing needs that come with opening newer development areas. So those costs end up being added on to accommodate that growth. You can see that, like, water has gone up. It's more than doubled. So a lot of this is just driven by the cost and by the servicing needs. Now, there are some of the other services you can see with fire and with parks and recreation. I think in years past, my recollection was that was kind of held lower. It may have been felt with the amount of development we're having, everything's okay for now. But now with the, you know, larger areas being opened up, once again, those areas that need additional parklands and additional facilities, that's activating the need for more capital expenditures. And this particular area, we haven't maxed out. There's a calculation that we must do, service standard calculation, that says you can collect up to this amount. And even with these increases, we haven't maxed out on what you could recover from development charges. I think these are more reflective of looking at those different areas, looking at the additional park needs, and looking at the additional recreation. So if you go back into the details of the projects, it's all the individual works that are being identified to accommodate the growth, which is moving the charges up.
So, Mr. Chair, if I'm hearing the presenter, we could build, let's say, a waterfall chart that says, okay, we're at 15.9 and we're going up $8,000. Here, 1,000 of it's this, you know, 1,000 of it's water, you know, 1,500 of it's that. So we could build out a story right there that says, here's, these things have all gone up this amount, and basically justify why we're sitting at 23,000. And then it's a question of, you know, is it the right thing to do? That's what you get down to. Is it the right thing to do? So I mean, it's no different, for me, it's no different than trying to hand a price increase through to a customer. You gotta justify it, and if you can justify it and sell it with increased costs, it makes sense. You know, it's the right thing to do, so, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, there it is, okay. Thank you, Chair Petriva. Before it turns off. So I think, I'm not sure if I asked this question last time when you presented, but has there been any consideration of phasing some of these charges in so that, you know, to avoid sticker shock? And if so, and the decision was against, why is that?
The approach that we've taken is really a form of phasing. Your bylaw lasts until May next year. So because we've done the calculations now, we've given well in advance notice that the charges are going up, so that this is a form of phasing in. We're going to hold the line for the next 5 months, and then the charges will go up. Doing this approach, because we're still within the term of your bylaw, we're allowing for that existing bylaw to continue, and we won't have to fund the difference between what we've calculated and what your current charge is. If we decide that if we want to go up by $1,000 next year and then $1,000, phase it in over 5 years, when you do that, the difference between what we've calculated and what you're facing is, every time there's a building permit pulled, you have to finance that difference. So it was many different things we were trying to consider. I think staff chose a good approach in that it minimizes the impact on the taxpayer. It does give the development community a fair period of time to adjust to it. Keep in mind, with the dialogue, we've been handing information and calculations to them. By the time the bylaw gets implemented, it'll be over a year of dialogue. So it's not that we've just all of a sudden developed these charges. We've had a long discussion with them. It's almost a year and a half, I think. So they know that these cost increases were coming, and that's where we're at.
Okay,
So this is a form of phase-in, but this one costs you the least amount of money.
I see what you're saying, where it's a bit of a delay. It's not as much of a phasing as it is a delay and a little bit more warning before they go up. All right.
Okay, thank you, Chair Petriva. Just some comments. I get really nervous when I hear a 40% increase, and I think about the small builders that are in town. That's the way they make their living. It's how they support their families. 40% is a huge hit to them. These are people who build a handful of houses a year. And I think about all the trades it's all going to trickle down to, and then the cost to the people that they're actually building for. 40% to me is just huge. And I've heard from some of the local builders myself. They've talked to me about it. They're afraid. They think it's an extreme increase. When I hear we're going to be the highest in the region, that makes me very nervous as well. I don't know if I can even support this, to be honest with you. I see the reasoning why, I see the numbers, but it's just a huge increase, and 40%, I don't know however you spin it. It's 40%. Like, that's massive. That's a massive increase. That's hitting people right in their pockets. And we're talking about trying to keep life affordable here. And that's hitting people where it hurts. And I just don't like it at all. I don't think we need to go that high. Maybe in the perfect world we need 40% to make it all work. Why can't we go halfway? You know, just throwing that out there. Anyway, that's my comments.
Through Mr. Chairman. So maybe I'll make a few comments. I was going to save them to the end of the conversation, but I can definitely make them now. I heard some comments earlier around balance, and I think anytime we look at balance, That's often something difficult to absorb. And I also don't want to simply say it's about passing it on to the consumer. Because I think, to your point, Councillor, it's easy to say that the developer will pass it on to the consumer, but again, there's always that balance. As you know, and I think we've continued to say, we are a changing community, one of the fastest growing municipalities here in Niagara. I'd caution to say that we're the highest now and that we will remain the highest during the 5-year term. And I only say that to say that when you're the first one out, you of course are going to be the highest. And I think both Ms. Stefani and Ms. Dale highlighted the differences between Pelham, who went a year and a half or so before us, who are right now are the next highest. A number of the other municipalities are coming after us. Some of them are built out, some of them are continuing. So this study is going to look, I think, different than previous studies that you've seen. It isn't necessarily just about catch-up, but it's about first starting with what are the projects we believe can get done in the next 10-year horizon, and really starting from an evidence-based perspective, not just simply, what should DCs be? There isn't an arbitrary nature to how we came up the number, and I understand the 40% calculation that you're challenging us with. This is one of those. You've heard me talk about generational decisions. This is an important decision that council has to make. It is about looking at what are the projects that council wants. You see up there the increases around recreational facilities. We talk about the challenges we have from a parks and recreational standpoint. And those are things we need to look at. We talk about fire protection and what we need to invest from a fire protection services. We see the investment that we've just made in Camden in a new fire station. We look at library services that have gone up. I mean, if you look at each one of those numbers, they are all justifiable. And I completely understand the difficulty sometimes in looking at these numbers that council faces right now. But we will reach a stage where we're unable to grow anymore. So I shared with you, we have this window right now, and that is the window that we're before you, trying to highlight why we need to move in this particular policy. We're constrained by land use. We're constrained by land policy. So this is about being proactive and thinking long term. And so those are the comments I make, as it relates to the kind of why and why the 40%. Again, I prefer to deal in numbers, not percentages, and I think percentages make for great headlines. But in terms of the numbers that we're dealing with, they're all justifiable.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkopoulos. And I know this is, having gone through this and going through it and looking at it, and it seems rather daunting, but when you look at it, you know what? We've done a really good job of tackling, I'm going to say, the hard services. So the water, the wastewater, the stormwater. Our water system's at a point of self-sustainability because we bit that bullet in the last development charges, and look where we are. We're half of what it is. Now, unfortunately, we didn't do a good job of replacing parks and fire services. The Camden Fire Hall is 50 years old where it was dug down. So we're building a new fire hall in Camden. We're building a new fire hall in Vineland. We're going to build a new fire hall in Beamsville. All results of growth-related impact to the town. You don't want to put this burden on the existing taxpayer. They didn't ask for the growth. And you can see, fire protection, outdoor services, indoor services, where we really have not done a good job. We've got parks in the town that need refreshing. We've got Prokich Park that's been on the books for 10 years. Now finally it's being done, and we're changing that mentality, that the way they address those issues. We're almost like a, and to Mr. Scanlon, if you can maybe, I'm going to throw this out to you, almost like a Yeti, almost like a Loch Ness Monster, a greenbelt community with 7 distinctive urban areas. I would argue we're the only one in the province that has this. Like I'm trying to rack my head and go Halton Hills, and I might come with 4, and Pelham there might be 3. So it puts such a burden on delivering those services to each one of those municipalities. And you guys know yourself, when we sit around here at budget time and we talk about a skate park, and we've got the East End saying, well, we want one too. unfortunately, it takes dollars to buy all these things, right? So your growth is going to generate a partial of that new things that you want, and then your existing community is going to bear the brunt of that. So if is there anyone else that comes to mind, or are we?
Some of the larger amalgamated municipalities, like the Chatham Kents, okay, or the Brant counties, you know, where they've amalgamated, they have the exact same thing. And yeah, Brant County I'm working with right now, and yeah, their charges are up, you know, in the order of magnitude as yourself, actually a little bit higher, and they've got all those different areas as well, and it is a challenge. I mean, you know, if you don't want the charge, then as you're indicating here, well, then we'll cut the fire stations out, or we'll have the existing taxpayer pay for all these expansions. So it's always a balance. It's always a balance. You don't have many tools available to you. The development charge is meant to allow you to recover really the cost that they activate or they require. Water and sewer, they can't build unless they have pipes. You can't get water in, you know, it's not going to work. Some of the other services, they're, you know, people wait until they're in the door, and then you as individuals are the ones they come and speak to. So if we don't generate the money here, you have to find other ways of addressing their needs. And as I say, you're no different than many other municipalities, so we always have to try and find this balance between the development, the developers or the home builders that buy it, but then at the end of the day, you either drop your service levels or you try and maintain the service levels by collecting the charge. And that's why, if you recall that presentation I made, I show you that triangle, because it's either, if you got growth, it activates a lot of costs, and it either goes on the property taxpayers, it goes in the development charge, or you drop your service levels. And it's a tough choice.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to go back to a couple of earlier comments, no disrespect to the CAO, but 40% is also a number that we have to look at with this, and it's an important number. So, and I was mentioning earlier the discussion about capital items that were included within this. I took a look through that, and I have to be perfectly honest, I'm not exactly sure where that list of capital items came from, and it seems to me that we're about to replace every last single institution that we have within this municipality. So, like, I think there's a couple of things need to be seriously thought through with this. As I said, I did have a discussion with the CAO this afternoon just to make sure that the next council certainly are going to have a chance to talk again about the 10-year capital plan, because some of the things that are there simply don't exist on that at the moment. And so, anyway, I happen to agree with Councillor Timmers. This is a pretty major hit, so, you know, just be prepared. There's going to be unhappiness about this.
So I think that we also, in striking a balance, need to realize that the last time this was done, I think, was 5 years ago. Is that fair? You know, so our world has changed in the last 5 years, and if you're only going to get a chance to change it every 5 years, I think you're going to see somewhat of a increase like this. We're facing a growth in the next 5 years that we may not have ever seen in this community. And if we don't get this right, we may miss the opportunity. So, you know, there's going to be a lot of demands on services 5 years down the road that, you know, we're going to have to pay for. So, you know, it's tough for us to make this decision. I see that, but I think we've got to not get hung up on it's 40% from where it was. Is it good value? Is it right for us today? And can we, you know, look at this as the developers are going to make X number of dollars on the houses they're selling? And does this fit within that framework? to be able to say, this is fair. You know, I think we got to be careful in looking at what is sitting there from 5 years ago and look at what's changed and what's coming at us in the next 5 years. Thank
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure that 3 years from now, we're not saying, oops, we maybe didn't think this through to the full extent of the lifespan of this particular piece of legislation. I trust that staff has gone through this with a fine-tooth comb and has incorporated the items based on what I've seen in the reports and have planned accordingly. And if things change, I mean, 5 years down the road, there won't have to be as substantial an increase, or maybe we'll be right on the money. 5 years ago, when it was done previously, we weren't seeing the indicators we're seeing today about pretty much the rest of the free space that's within the urban area being developed. Yes, I don't like 40%, but I'm actually not going to look at a percentage. I'm actually looking at the numbers that I'm seeing up there, and I'm pretty good with that from a standpoint of I feel they've been vetted properly, and I think we need to do what's right that will put us in a position 5 years down the road to not be kicking ourselves going, we shoulda, coulda, woulda. So anyway, that would be my 2 cents.
Mr. Chairman, I've already spoken. I noticed that Councillor Benet hasn't. If he wishes to speak, I'll stand down and come after him.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. Through you, Mr. Chair. So I've tried to remain just in the listening mode for the last little while, but I mean, I agree with many comments. Obviously, this is a major issue that we're looking at, and certainly I do not believe that we should be getting caught up in the percentages. I think we need to. We can't look backwards. I mean, yes, there's a certain component of this. There's no doubt. We can't bury our head in the sand that there is a component here of catch-up. But I would argue that we are looking at probably unexperienced growth in our community moving forward. You know, you look at the groundbreaking ceremony at Cache and what's happening up with Vista Ridge, and then the development that's going to take place for the next 7 to 10 years at Prudhome's. I kind of assimilated to you know, a hockey team, and you know, there's these big signings that are taking place where players are getting millions and millions of dollars, and the first team signs their star and he pays 10 million, and the next year a team's paying 12 million, and then it's 15 and 20. So the guy that got in early looks pretty good when he paid 10 million. You know, I think really this process and the timelines that we've looked at in looking at this, you know, this document from Watson, and looking at the stakeholder consultation with the indexing and the implementation of new rates, I think we've you know, we've gone out to the stakeholders and we've received consultation. I guess, you know, I'm not at the table with those consultants, so you know, just as I finish up, I would maybe ask you know, the CAO or maybe through you, Mr. Chair, to our presenters, just to, you know, to really give to us what some of this consultation has been from these developers. These are the people that are going to be putting a shovel in the ground, and I really believe that you know, we really have to look at this, because I do believe there's a large component of this that, you know, yes, we're the first in, but when you look at where we're going to be in the next couple of years with other municipalities, I think we'll be right there. I think Mr. Scanlon's already indicated that places like Brant County and what's happened with all the land up there between the city of Brantford and Brant County, and one having services and one having land, and bringing it all to the table. I mean, there is a process here, and you only get so many opportunities to make some of these big developments. And I really think that you know, we need to be very cognizant that this is unexperienced growth, and we need to making sure that we're planning for this wisely. Yes, we need to have stakeholder consultation. We don't want to be driving business away and business development away. But boy, oh boy, we need to be very cognizant that we're in the Greenbelt. We've only got so many opportunities to develop. And you look at where the developers are moving. I mean, they're moving from Brantford to Burlington to Dundas, and they're coming down here. And they're coming down here not because they like us, because there's land here that needs to be developed. So it's a win-win for everybody. So yes, this is a difficult process. There's no doubt about it. But I do believe that we've looked at this in a very timely fashion. We haven't just jumped on this and made a knee-jerk reaction. So, you know, I really like this document, and I think we need to be looking at this, you know, that this is unexperienced growth, and we need to really be wise about this. And I'm fairly comfortable with it. But maybe just to finish, through you, Mr. Chair, to either the CAO or to our presenters, if you could just, you know, kind of tell us just over this last, you know, really from, I guess, October 17th to the summer of 2018, we've had stakeholder consultation. That's a long time. What are our developers telling us? Like, let's be honest and let's be open and transparent. What are we hearing?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Our consultation started October 17. We brought the developer community around the table just to provide them an update that we were looking at updating our DC charges earlier than expected, and just to get their buy-in. Once we had our rates calculated, we brought them back around again and had the public consultation. Again, they weren't too happy with the 25,002 here that you see up on the presentation slide. So we went back. They provided several comments looking at specific projects, deferring specific projects, the dollar values. So we looked at those projects. We looked at, was there a rationale for where it was timed? Was there a period that we should be pushing this out past? Because were we including too much in the 10-year? Should we be pushing money further out? We did do some of those adjustments. We looked at projects to ensure that should this be part of the DC or should this be part of the development, looking if that was a fair application. So we actually removed a project thinking that wasn't fair. And then we again looked at the timing of our projects and the cost of all the projects and made those adjustments. And that's where you see our rates here at the 22.6. Again, they were around the table September 7th, 14th, I believe it was. They saw the revised number. I would get a feeling that they may not have been the happiest with the revised number. Happy it's down and happy they were heard, but I don't know how well this number is being taken right now. Oh, yes.
I think, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I think probably the biggest concern was whether or not the town was going to implement it shortly after it getting passed versus having a later implementation date. So that was a big concern of the developers. So I think pushing it out to what staff are recommending at this time is the March 1st, they're happier with that. Obviously, the developers don't want to have to pay more money for the development charges, but I mean, they did express that, you know, they've got a lot of home purchases agreements signed, so pushing it out helps alleviate the pain a bit.
Through Mr. Chairman, I think I'd just add to that and probably echo what the two presenters just said, and that is, I don't think anyone was happy when we first came forward. The 25,000, as I said to you when we were presenting before you, was a bit of sticker shock. And so I think that there was definitely that, okay, 25, what went into making that $25,000 number or that $7,000 increase initially? You know, what was involved in the projects? Could you actually complete the projects? And I think we went through a very thorough analysis, probably the most thorough one we've done as a senior management team as it related to the projects. What made sense? What projects were in there? What conceivably could even get done? Forget the ability to pay for those projects, but what from a human resource standpoint at the current complement right now, were we able to accomplish in terms of projects in that time horizon that you see included? And so we definitely heard things around CIPs, for example, one of our largest developments going on here. We've heard Prudham's referenced a number of times, will not benefit from this phase-in whatsoever. Whether that phase-in is March 1st, whether that phase-in is April 30th, which we heard as an option as it relates to when asphalt plants open, for example. Any of those changes won't impact Prudhome's whatsoever. But what we did here specifically was you are working on a specific Prudhome CIP. Hopefully that CIP addresses and allows us to remain competitive, because that is the big development that we see coming down the pipe that this will have the biggest impact on. And I see representatives here from our Prudhome's development, from our FBH group, and I think that was the conversation we had with them specifically was, okay, now that you've got these DCs in place, what are the other things that municipalities use to help those particular elements out? Those similar CIPs that we have, I think to Councillor Timmer's point around, you've got the smaller developer who's got a few properties that they're building. How do we deal with those? They don't have the massive numbers, and so when you've got small developments, that's sometimes more difficult. I think where possible, we're aware of which developers are currently in the ground, so to speak, or almost in the ground. I think we are going to be informing them of this. For those that don't know about it, informing them of the phasing or informing them of the implementation date, what happens as a result of that, when they can come to us earlier rather than later. Maybe they can prepay. I think there's going to be a few things that those that are far enough along. Of course, there are going to be those that are a year or two out that won't benefit whatsoever from anything that we put in place, and they will get caught in this. But I think, we will do our best to work with all developers that are coming forward to the municipality. So I think what we heard was, we understand. We had our most recent kind of consultation group with a couple of consultants that were hired by some of the development community. They had a few questions. They asked us why this development was in, or why this project was in, or how does this development fit with a few other things. It was probably about a half an hour meeting. Probably went a little bit better than I actually thought it would go. Anytime you put a bunch of development type consultants in a room asking us questions. So overall, I would say that it was a fairly positive interaction, as much as something like this can be positive. So.
I did something. Oh, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, yes, I feel like I've been in this process for, Mr. Scanlon, how many months have we been talking about this in the region? This is, by comparison, this is a very tight document, I think. Would you agree with me? Thank you. I think it is a pretty tight document. So I've watched this, and over the years, I've watched how every time the development charges come forward, and we seem to be very nervous about, and we worry about other people's business plans and how it's going to impact on them. We don't seem to take into account what the long-term impact is for us, and I think that's what this document does. And there may be some fine-tuning that we do, which I think is where Councillor Foster is coming from. Absolutely, Council will not lose control of the process. And that's clear in the document, and I think stating it as well is certainly doesn't do any harm. But I don't understand why we would be so willing to leave money on the table when we know very well what the costs are going to be like in the future. It just doesn't make any sense to me at all. So maybe it's the amount of time I've been listening to this story, both at the regional level, where, by the way, they were asking for 50%, I believe, and they also had a substantial amount of money still coming from the province. I didn't support the motion because they had other sources of money that we certainly don't have. So I will be supporting this because I believe that we finally have it right, and we shouldn't be apologizing because we need this revenue to look after our town. And when that whole process dries up, we will still need to maintain services in our town. And I don't think the expectations are going to decrease. So people that are coming in the future need to do their part to support the services here. So I won't be stepping back from this, even though we are talking the amount of money that they are. I think it is the right thing to do. Thank you.
So I have one last question then, and it's probably buried in the report, but I obviously have weeded it out. But I'm fascinated with this reduction that we're going to put in place for agriculture for 750. Is this for, square meters? Is this something that came from the agriculture community, or is this something that we thought might be some sort of a charge to get things moving within the agriculture sector? As the first question, and then the second part of that, and I alluded to it in my initial comments, is no disrespect to the agriculture industry, and Lord knows I've been involved with it long enough myself, and so many differing ways with my family, but it's always been an advantageous situation for the farming community when it comes to taxation, etc. So I guess the question is, are we also going to combine that with a SIP a piece of the puzzle as well? Because I'm thinking the classic double dipping might not be a good thing in this situation. So maybe Mr. Kirkopoulos can answer that one.
So I think Ms. Dale wants to say something, and then I will chime in after her.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, in regards to the proposal that was put forward to exempt the first 750 square meters, we have been getting recently a lot of ag-related type development, and one of the things that gets expressed by that development community is the development charges are fairly high. So there is support from the agricultural community for some sort of exemption. Obviously, they probably would have liked to be completely exempted from development charges. So what town staff did is looked at some of the size requirements in the official plan, did some consultation with our economic development department, and that's how we came up with the 750 square meters.
Through Mr. Chair, I think the other comment that I would make, having been privy to the conversation specifically around agriculture, was one of the things that is in our OP and also came out of our economic development strategy, and that is supporting our Center of Excellence for agriculture and that increased investment in agriculture. And so I think that was part of the rationale that came forward. I absolutely take your comments around the CIPs, Councillor, specifically as it relates to agriculture, and I think those are things that we're definitely going to look at when that CIP is developed. I think we're looking at some more broad-based CIPs, and so I think your comment around double dipping, so to speak, I think is duly noted. And so when we come back, we need to make sure that we're administering our CIPs in a fair and equitable way, knowing that we've got limited resources with those CIPs as well.
If I might, Mr. Chair.
Anything new to add, Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, I just wanted to, through you, Mr. Chair, to the CAO, in and around the flexibility that he spoke about, specifically to maybe the smaller developers, in and around the implementation date and stuff like that, the ability to do things differently, prepay and whatnot. Can you just extrapolate a little bit on that for me, or maybe?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna defer, I think, the first part of that question to Ms. Dale to talk about the prepayment, as we had a conversation this morning, and then I can highlight one comment specifically that also came up.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, there's actually kind of two parts to that. As I mentioned previously, for some of the smaller builders, if they're planning to build fairly soon, they will be able to take out their permits most likely before that March 1st date or any other date that's approved by council. The other part of that is, sorry, lost my train of thought. Sorry. Site plan. Yeah, so there are a number of smaller developers that are going through site plan approval. So those ones will probably be able to get their permits in short order. Sorry, the other part of the question is too, is under the Development Charges Act, you can also prepay your development charges. So that's an option that people can prepay their development charges ahead of time if they're planning to develop in the near future.
So I would assume that's at the existing rate as opposed to the proposed rate. Okay. From a standpoint of timing, is there some flexibility there? Do we need to go May 1st? Do we need to? I don't want to penalize people I know it's been 5 months, but I know we have till June 1st to go forward, and anyway.
Through Mr. Chairman, why don't I try to field that particular question? One of the conversations staff had this morning due to some inquiries coming in since we presented last week was definitely around the implementation date. Again, that'll impact some, it won't impact others. One of the things that was brought forward, and again, not something I know a lot about, but the rationale made sense and staff did discuss it, and that is specifically as it relates to when asphalt plants open. And my understanding is that that happens within that April 1 to April 15th timeframe, definitely here in southwestern Ontario. It's a little bit later in the season when you go to more of our, more of the northern municipalities or northern regions. And so I think staff discussed one particular option of looking at an April 30th implementation date versus a March 1st, knowing that from the standpoint of fairness and when those asphalt plants open, that there would be some rationale for doing that. Director Graham was part of that conversation, as was Ms. Safani and Ms. Dale this morning. So I think as it relates to timing and some of that flexibility, we were looking at April 30th versus March 1st in terms of some additional flexibility for those that would be caught in that kind of middle period.
Mr. Chair.
Councillor McPherson.
So the good counselor's got me thinking here on this whole 750 thing. So I'm just thinking about who that would apply to, and thinking about our wine business, our brewery business, which is somewhat commercial, somewhat industrial, somewhat ag, and then our greenhouses is 100% ag, and how that is favoring, if you will, a certain industry within the ag. So I'm not so sure we shouldn't think through a little bit more in with the CIP that I think we're working on and is coming, and how that fits with the CIP and then with the development charges, because it's not, and I've heard this from people in the community that are paying, a combination of the taxes, that the true ag is favored, if you will, whereas what is an ag value add does have commercial, industrial taxes to pay. So, maybe through you to the delegation, how do we qualify these projects?
Okay, so from a development charges point of view, some uses, like a winery, for example, may pay on, say, the processing portion, an industrial development charge. They may have a retail store, so they'll pay the commercial DC rate on that portion. Some of the winery, component of the winery is actually agriculture, so they don't pay any development charges on that. So depending on the type of project, they may pay different types of development charges. If they built a house on the farm, they pay a residential development charge. And then when it gets to their assessment, they may have a portion that's agricultural, so it's a lower tax rate. They may have a portion that has commercial assessment, they may have a portion that's industrial assessment, and then the house will have a residential assessment.
So that's, if I may, Mr. Chair, so this really does speak to the greenhouse business, is really what we're isolating here, is the cannabis business coming, you know, for those that are ag value add would pay the full, on that portion of their development, they would pay the full development charge, is that right?
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chairman, so to use the example of cannabis facility in a greenhouse, so there is a component that they would pay industrial development charges because there is some processing associated with that.
So that would be 5%, 10%
It depends on the size of the square footage.
Generally speaking,
Yeah,
generally
it's
speaking.
usually small compared to
piece.
the growing area. Where they're growing the plants, that would be agriculture.
Whereas a winery, it might be 50%.
It really depends. Each situation is very much unique because it really depends on the square footage of the individual buildings.
Mr. Chair, I just think we need to get this right. You know,
Mr. Deanne.
Yes, thank you.
come to
Chair.
our rescue.
Well,
He's got it,
I'm-
it right.
Through you, Chair, I'm gonna clarify on the CIP portion. So, further to our discussion last week on the CIP program that's gonna be coming forward to council for presentation, what we're looking at incentivized is not necessarily the agricultural component of buildings, more so on the industrial and the commercial side of things. So when you think of bench brewing, for example, further what Director Dale said, you know, they would charge an agricultural, a commercial and industrial development charge rate. So the CIP that we're looking to bring forward would be a reduction on the industrial and commercial side. So where we're trying to target this, and further to what the CAO said, is, you know, we're trying to incentivize or further development around our Center of Excellence for Agriculture, trying to spur additional investment on the value-added agricultural side of things. So we'd be looking at developments such as Corny, for example, which we're charged a component of agricultural, meaning zero, and industrial DC rates. For example, in addition, in Vineland Growers, we know they're looking for expansion in the new year, so we're looking at incentivizing something along those lines because they'd be charged industrial and commercial as well. So those are the type of programs that we're looking at, or type of investment that we're looking at when it comes to those CIP programs. I hope I answered your question.
So am I hearing that for those that would be in that ag value add business, we've got something for you too? That's what I'm hearing, is that?
Yes, precisely.
So the greenhouse industry, you get the full advantage of the DC discount. And for the winery, brewery, for that piece of the ag business, you don't really get the full advantage of the DC discount, but we've got something else for you.
Precisely, yes.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yep.
Thank
And
you,
I
Mr.
mean, in addition, Director Dale can confirm, but if you're a greenhouse operation, you're actually exempt from DCs currently. And, but you're right, in terms of what we're trying to provide for is those businesses that can situate in the Greenbelt, but would be charged the industrial and commercial rates. We're trying to incentivize those growths because we're trying to use the land that we have in Lincoln.
So the greenhouse business is exempt today from the DCs. I didn't know that. This is my first time through this. Is that?
Some of the processing through your chair, some of the processing side of things would be charged for, but the growing component would not be charged. So the actual greenhouse where they're growing, the structure, those things would be exempt, but the processing, shipping, receiving, those would be charged. Sorry, I should have clarified.
So it's a non-argument. Didn't know that. Forget what I just said.
Mr. Kirkopoulos.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think probably a good illustrative example would be the recent move from Grimsby to Lincoln of Corneve Produce, which falls in that, what I'm going to call that, you know, and something for you too as well, Councillor. There's that value add piece. In their mind, they'd want to make a case that they're agriculture. We look at it as more of an industrial operation. And so this helps offset some of that. Now, that is a massive facility. And 750 isn't a huge, 750 square meters doesn't allow for a huge, what I'm going to call discount on the development charges they're paying, but it does demonstrate a commitment from the perspective of looking at some of these other value-added type industries. trying to incentivize them to come here from other places when they're looking at our DC. So I think that's a good example of one that's recently in the hopper that we've been able to move here.
And if I may too, before I go to your worship, I mean, that was part of that whole discussion. We came up with our official plan, Center for Excellence in Agriculture, and through that move, there was identified a loophole, and it was either industrial or ag. In a commercial, there was nothing in between. So, I mean, staff worked diligently on this to come up with an inclusionary number to say, okay, if we're going to say that this is what we are, then we need to find something, Councillor, like you said, for everyone. So this addresses that. It's not industrial, but it's not straight ag. It's a combination of the two. So we're able to lure that, and you're going to look at, like Mr. Deanny said, like Vineland Growers is going to undergo an expansion. You want something in place for them. You don't want someone like that to leave town. So this is the ability to say to them, we're this center, we need the processing, we need the transshipment, we need the, you being a broker for those small farmers, because that's what they are. They're a wholesaler for the many small farmers here that are able to actually stay in business because they've got an intermediary acting for them. They don't have to go to market each day. So that person is there, and it just puts a nice package together for them. Your Worship.
Mr. Chairman, I think this is a very good discussion because we have operationalized the official plan element of the Center of Excellence for Agriculture, and I'm sure that there are, we're starting to see areas that maybe we couldn't have predicted or we weren't really too sure how they were going to roll out. I've heard farmers talking about the 25% farm tax. It's not the great bonanza that it appears to be because farmland values have increased, capital costs have gone through the roof, and the resale opportunities for farms are much less. So we may want to have a look at what the true benefit is now, given some of the changing circumstances. But I also wanted to reinforce, because these production facilities are going to be so important to us, and the policies around food safety are so significant now, smaller farmers cannot afford to hire personnel or to have all of those packing facilities, and so they're going to a big company like Vineland Grower and Corneef. That's how Corneef actually even had an opportunity to get into the market. Because the smaller farmers just can't do it. There's so much specialization involved. So we absolutely need to analyze this. We do need to understand these elements. We shouldn't be, things are not static. I think that Councillor Foster's comment and Councillor McPherson, they're really just sending up a bit of a bellwether. We need to understand this. Thank you.
Would you like to wrap up?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I will keep it ever so brief. And that is, we have two motions before council, and I think we're looking for council direction. And that is specifically to the date. So we shared with you both a March 1st and an April 30th date. And I think we're looking for council direction on how you'd like to proceed on that.
I would certainly like to give a little more leeway. I think that's prudent. Well, I just think there's maybe it is 6 months, yeah, instead of 5 months. If staff feel that there's a need for it, then that's possible. I'm okay with that. Otherwise, I'm okay with either, really. But I mean, if we see there might be a hiccup for some people, and there's no way around that hiccup, then, then we could be flexible with it. Or we could just have them prepay, I guess. I suppose they could do that too. Sorry, that wasn't very clear, right? But, I mean, I muddied it up a
Butters
little
even
bit
more,
more,
yes,
I
yes.
apologize.
Yeah,
I'd be okay with,
Yeah.
I was very straightforward on
Yes.
that. My apologies.
I know it's election season.
Yeah, I'm getting tired.
Yes, okay.
So I'd be okay with the latter date at the end of the day.
Okay. Yeah, so, okay, so
April.
everyone's just, we had an hour conversation on this topic, and we've kind of acquiesced to the later date for the most part, if I can get like a nod or motion, or do you want to bring the one and, like I was going to ask the clerk, okay, you've got it's two-sided. I am. I'm going to have to enunciate. I might have a drink of water. Mr. Braccione might need a cough candy. Okay. Oh. And isn't that par for the course? So, we have a motion moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor McPherson, that report TR 18-20 regarding the development charge update be received as information, and it is recommended that Council, A, whenever appropriate, request that grants, subsidies, and other contributions be clearly designated by the donor as being to the benefit of the existing development or new development as applicable. B, adopt the assumptions contained herein as an anticipation with respect to capital grants, subsidies, and other contributions. C, continue the DC approach to calculate the charges on an urban-wide basis for water, wastewater, and stormwater, and on a uniform town-wide basis for all other services. D, continue the DC approach to calculate the charges on an area-specific basis for stormwater in the area of Camden. E, approve the proposed capital project listing set out in Chapter 5 of the DC's background study dated May 17, 2018, as amended by Addendum Number 1 dated September 7, 2018. Subject to Council's intentions, which may alter capital projects and timing required from time to time based on the need for services required by new growth. F, approve the DC's background study dated May 17, 2018, as amended by Addendum Number 1 dated September 7, 2018. G, determine that no further public meetings are required. H, approve the DC bylaw as set out in Appendix D to the staff report TR 18-20. And number 3, that the implementation date for the new fees take effect and commence on April 30th, 2019. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Okay, so our second report this evening is TR 18-21 Asset Management Policy. Are there any questions from committee members, or is there a presentation for to come? No. Okay. So this one I think was pretty straightforward. Okay. So we have a motion moved by Councillor Renchima and seconded by Councillor Foster. The Council adopt the Strategic Asset Management Policy FN 2018-01. All those in favor? That is carried. Report number C, TR 18-23, the FCM Asset Management Funding. Any questions from committee members with respect to this report? Okay, I see none. So we've got a motion moved by Councillor Timmers, seconded by Councillor Brunet. The Council directs staff to apply for a grant opportunity from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, Municipal Asset Management Program for the Enhanced Asset Management System, and that the Corporation of the Town of Lincoln commits to conducting the following activities in its proposed project submitted to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Municipal Asset Management Program to advance our asset management program. Establish cross-functional asset management team. Design and implement processes to enhance asset management decision-making, and provide role-appropriate training for staff. And that the Corporation of the Town of Lincoln commit $70,000 from its budget towards the cost of this initiative. All those in favor? And that is carried. Okay. Our fourth report this evening is TR 18-24 Vacancy Rebate and Reduction Update. Councillor McPherson.
Just a comment, and very happy to see this report and support it wholeheartedly. I think it's going to give us a nice shot in the arm to help in our vibrant downtowns, particularly. Timely, I think, with what we're trying to do in our downtowns to make them a place of, for people to come and enjoy, and some incentive for some of these building owners to find applicable tenants that will enhance those downtown cores. So I like this and I'll support it.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you. So, of course, the idea behind this, of course, is to be sort of negatively incentivizing people who have got vacant land to go and do something with it, or at least if I read the underpinnings of all of this as we're going through. And so, we have more than enough of that within the community, and given what we've also done this evening, and we know that the massive amount of other development that's going on down the road here, I foresee a huge amount of work landing on staff out of all of this. I mean, you just be prepared. You're going to be having staff coming back stating, we're going to need a lot more, because this is all kind of all hitting all at the exact same time when this is all said and done. The Purdham's development, doing all of this type of thing, and anyway, just you're going to have a fun time in the next term trying to decide how you're going to be staffing. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could, through you, does staff have an actual number, financial implication to this municipality with regards to the total, for example, of 2017, of what this cost us in tax dollars? Because I didn't really see it. I saw a lot of percentages in the report and what it might cost an individual resident.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I don't have it for 2017, but we did bring a report forward back in 2016 when the province made this change, and the implication in that report was approximately $30,000 shift in taxes. So once the complete phase out was done.
For the entire municipality?
That's correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Mr. Deanne.
Thank you, Chair. Through to the committee. Just to take note, this is a regional program, so it's actually the region that's bringing forth this reduction or getting rid of the incentive and reduction to hold on to land. And I just do want to mention that we have been in conversation with our regional counterparts in the Economic Development Department there to talk about this program. And it has generated a lot of conversation throughout the Niagara region on this. There are brokers and industrial and commercial brokers that are talking about this as potentially having an impact on their industry. But further the comments that I heard this evening, I'm actually fully supportive of the region doing this. We do have a number of landowners, not only in Lincoln, but throughout the region that are just holding on to land. This removing the program will actually hopefully spur them to actually redevelop, sell, and actually invest in their properties. So from my perspective, I actually think this is a good program, but I'm happy to.
Yeah, Mr. Danny, because when I was going over this myself, I thought maybe the region had it backwards. And I was having that discussion with Ms. Stefani, like, you know, a developer goes ahead and builds a unit, and we're having that, you know, going forward with you know, the urbanization with our commercial units on the bottom and you know, mixed commercial use and then residential on the top. And they've already made that investment. So they've already put their, you know, money where their mouth is and invested in our town. And the subsidy to them is gone within 3 years, where the speculative land gets a lot longer. And I thought it should have been reversed. That was, you know, I think the region had it backwards, really, because like you say, you don't want people holding on to that land. You want them to do something with it. Yet the people that have made the commitment, have put the money up, have paid their fees in that, in 3 years it's gone. So I you know, if any of your discussions in the region, you know, in the future, you know, I know they do things sometimes backwards, but I think this is a case where it, you know, it's clearly an example of they got it wrong.
Yeah, through your chair, they are definitely moving in the right direction on this one, and I think because they've had some pushback, you do see a long implementation date or a phase-in approach to this, and I think the last year is 2024, if I recall correctly, on the document. So, you know, they have been in conversations with local area municipalities on doing this, and for the most part, from my understanding, is everyone's quite supportive.
Mr. Chairman, in fact, I don't think they have it wrong. We're talking about small properties here. There are a number of very, very large holdings across the region where this was going to make a huge difference. I mean, the amount of, in some cases, it was paying the annual taxes. So there really wasn't much incentive for people to get out there and start marketing the properties that they had. And I actually thought I had brought the regional report with me because it does have all the numbers in it. It's pretty substantial for some communities.
Yeah, and that was my point, is that the speculators, those lands should have been the 3-year window that they got rid of, not the 8.
Well, it was the first time they'd ever really taken them to task on it, and so they were really trying to make it a little less painful. But basically, it's exactly as I think it was Councillor Foster said. They're sending a message. You can't just sit there and do nothing with your land. And we have the same thing in town. But it's getting more expensive to develop open land. But I mean, so that's our concern. But that's not what we're dealing with. We're talking about major land holdings here with a lot of development on them, and they're just doing nothing.
Ms. Stefani, would you like to provide some comments on this before we call the question?
Just to jump on Paul Deanne's comments, the what's our comment? The region did full consultation on this with stakeholders and the local municipalities to get their input on this, and this was the result of that. They went out 2 different times to finalize this recommendation.
Should I wait until the mayor comes back, or? No, go ahead. Okay. So, we have a motion moved by Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Timmers. The report TR 18-24 regarding vacancy rebate and reduction program update from the region of Niagara be received as information. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Now, the second report, which I, in my own mind, thought would generate some discussion and some banter and some repartee this evening, is CS 1806, Procedural Bylaw Update. Councillor Foster, if you didn't ask the question, I'll be very disappointed.
Oh, am I?
Oh,
Okay.
Councillor first.
My first question is, am I only limited to 2 questions?
After tonight, you will be.
Okay. So thank you to the committee that worked on this. This is, I think, fantastic work, and I think that, it's really exciting to see what's come out of this committee with the recommendations made. Some of the questions that I, in my own mind, just if I was in on the discussion, when I look at electronic participation, I guess I've got, on one hand, hey, that's great. If I'm, sitting on a beach in Florida, I can participate in the meeting. And then on the other hand is, how disruptive can that be to the rest of the members that are there with somebody that's not take the image of the beach, but take that out of it. But just I always find that, when you get into a meeting where somebody's on the phone or somebody's, it's very disruptive. So just an opinion that, I don't know how I feel about that one. It's sort of, hey, if we got a meeting, be here or you're not here. Right now, that's kind of where I'm at. I would, my comment on the mayor change, deputy mayor changing every month, I don't like that. I think that's very, it is disruptive. It's just, every month we're changing, and you're the mayor or you're deputy mayor twice a year, and it's like, am I on or I'm not on, or I like the way the mayor ran it this time with, you're on for 6 months, you commit to it, and away we go. So that comment about that. As far as the 3 committees and the council, fully supportive, and I know it's probably very, very difficult to put what goes with what, and I think that from recent history, I think that planning and economic development committee meeting could be a 5 or 6 hour meeting, the way we're going at planning and economic development today. They're both very lengthy meetings right now. So I think you've got a very meaty potential for a very, very long meeting when you look at that particular committee. So just from and I understand that this is not an easy science to formulate these committees, and they make sense. They certainly make sense from a what fits best with what standpoint, but I would be concerned that particular meeting, could be very, very lengthy. I'm going to make a suggestion that we consider for 1 or possibly 2 of these meetings that we have a start time of 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That, we, with all of the staff participating, with, only having a single meeting per month for these committees, to me, it makes sense that we would start it late in the afternoon, finish by 6 or 6:30, everybody goes home, and they have the rest of the evening with their family. So, and I would think that anybody that's working can, and wants to be on council should be able to plan to be at these 4 o'clock in the afternoon meetings, work their day so that they're here. So I understand that planning and economic development you may want to have the public being drawn into that particular subject matter more. So maybe you need to run that one at 6, but I would think the other two, I'd start them at 4, you know, and do that so that, you know, it's very, you know, staff is still here, you can come to the meeting, you know, if the meeting ends at 5:36, you're done. You're not hanging around for dinner, you're not, you know, out all night, you know, as far as your family is concerned, and we get the business done. So just, I think it for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That was one of the things too that the committee had struggled with, the deputy mayor. I mean, we had looked at 3 months, and then the talk was the 1 month, and there would be confusion, but the clerk assured us that, you know, the confusion or the perception of confusion is in our own minds as it's something new, that a lot of other municipalities do that. So doing the monthly changeover too would give you the opportunity to be the deputy mayor at different seasons throughout the year, over your 4-year terms. So you would actually do it, you know, you'd have that role during each year of your tenure. So when you think about it that way, you know, not bad. But I like your 4 o'clock.
I think I'm off now, and I apologize for that, but, you know, I think there's a badge of honor for the deputy mayor position, and to run it for a month, there's no badge of honor in my mind.
Okay.
You know, you're on, and then all of a sudden you're off. So I think there is that, okay, I'm the deputy mayor, you know, and, you know, there's functions that, you know, the mayor asks you to attend, or there's a relationship that you can build with the mayor at the time over that 6-month period. But if you're only on for a month, you're not really going to get that.
Okay.
So,
Councillor Foster.
sorry.
Yeah, actually, I completely agree with Paul on this. I think it should be, if you want to continue on with the way it was this past term, at least the last 2 years. I mean, I did have the first 2 years. I'll point that out. But the thing is that the rotating on a 3-month basis type of thing, I think, is a much better way of doing it. And I think it worked really well leading up to this point in time. And you know, there was some comments made back a while ago about you know, disagreements on the way certain things happen sometimes with committees and stuff like that, and particularly all the new people that have come onto council have come to realize that there's a steep learning curve that one has to go through when you're doing it. So the other thing you may want to seriously consider is going by seniority on the thing as well, as opposed to just, you know, doing it like make sure the first deputy mayor is someone that has been sitting on council, because, you know, it's going to take the rest of them a while to figure out what the heck it is that they're doing on council, right? So, you know, you slap some person first time onto council also into the deputy mayor position. You know, you may find that a little more difficult. So, but I like the 3 months. I think that would be ideal, and then you get twice during your term. I think it's great. So, anyway, thank you. Oh, and I was just going to say, I did send some notes to Mr. Kokopoulos on a couple of items. I saw a couple of sort of typos / things that weren't quite right. So, but I know staff have already caught that. So, thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Overall, I'm pretty pleased with this. I am kind of the ilk that the deputy mayor position should be a 4-month stint at a time, or 3-month quarterly, I guess is more accurate. I think the monthly thing would be, I don't know, it just doesn't seem effective to me. Anyway, I did have a question in and around committees under the 8.2 heading. And I'm just wondering if maybe the clerk could extrapolate a little bit about the reasoning behind motions not requiring a seconder and verbal motions as opposed to what we've been doing with regards to paper motions. And I'm just curious because it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. Thank you for noting that. That will be a change if council allows it. So at the standing committee level, not council, but at the standing committee level, we won't be doing the motions as you are used to right now. We will be calling the motion. Your hand will be called, carried. You will only be signing motions, a mover and a seconder, at council. That is a proposed change.
Okay, so if I might, Mr. Chair, so in other words, the chair will be stating the motion, and then obviously someone has to move it.
There'll be a mover and there will not be a seconder.
Okay, that's just different. Okay, very good. I am also kind of concerned in and around experience levels with regards to chairs within the first 2 years of a new term. Because it is a fairly overwhelming sort of position to take on if you're new. So I that's a consideration I think needs to be looked at. I don't think someone that's brand new is going to walk in and sit in the chair seat and maybe won't even know how to run a meeting particularly, just due to something that they've not ever experienced. But maybe that's all going to be covered in the new clerk training session. So maybe I'm misspeaking. So am I correct about that, Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So this will be covered in the council orientation, and the clerk's department will be working with each chair to ensure they have the proper training to conduct meetings at all times. And the clerk's department is always here for procedural advice during every single meeting. So everybody is elected equally, and there should be no determination based on seniority or who has what kind of experience. Everybody has the right to chair a meeting. And that is something that all municipalities try to strive for, is equality and fairness across the board. And nobody's going to gain any strength if they don't have the chance to chair the meeting. And this is, just so you know, that this is on a rotation basis. So this is on a yearly basis. Right. Okay.
So in the regulations, through you, Mr. Chair, is it possible someone might chair a certain specific committee twice, or is there regulation against that? I'm just, because it said you pick and some people are lucky at lotteries. Not me.
So there was going to be a draw. Now, there's nothing stating that we can't stipulate that you can't chair the same meeting the next year. You would have to actually forego that and perhaps maybe be a vice chair, but that is something that we can definitely look into.
Yeah, it doesn't really, I'm not concerned about it. I just didn't see any regulations in and around it and was just wondering.
Correct.
Thank you. That's it for me. I was actually able to get through it pretty succinctly.
Okay. Councillor Timmers.
Okay, thank you, Chair Patriva. I am quite happy with this, with the result. I like the four standing committees. I like the 6 p.m. start. I'm a little concerned about a 4 p.m. I could, to me, it's personally not a problem, but I think the 4 p.m. I've heard other municipalities comment such as the public can't be there at 4 o'clock. So I'd be a little concerned about that happening. Did you have some comment to the clerk? Okay.
Thank you, Councillor, through you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of a 4 p.m. start, most municipalities are going towards daytime meetings, and unless we know that there is a public hearing, so specifically planning and economic development, so unless planning has a public hearing, we would move that to the 6 p.m. start, and perhaps maybe put the reports through to the daytime, and then reconvene at the 6 p.m. start time, or perhaps maybe have that meeting knowing that there's going to be a public meeting, move it to the evening.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Okay, I'm good with that. I like the idea that the chairs and vice chairs are picked randomly. I think that's great. I think everyone gets equal opportunity, everyone gets experience. You don't want to be on council for 4 years and you've never been a chair of any committee. I don't think that's wise, and I think everyone needs to gain that experience. As far as the deputy mayor, I'm fine with it rotating monthly, although I'm flexible with that as well. Just one question around that. The chairs are not included in the deputy mayor position, is that correct?
That was an error on our part. That was
okay.
supposed to be omitted from this, yeah, but it was missed.
I thought that was a little odd.
It will
Okay.
come off, yeah.
Okay, very good. And if we're doing it quarterly, how will we work out the final year if there's 8? I'm just wondering if everything is done alphabetical, I would like to see it be switched the opposite way, so that someone who's not always the first and someone who's not always the last. Just my thoughts on that, so that it's truly fair and equitable across the board. I don't know how you feel about that, but if you have any comment on that.
I do. We chose to do it on a month-by-month basis so that everybody did have a chance to be deputy mayor in the first term, and then it'll still go towards the second term, third term, fourth term. If we go back to what it is now, which is every 3 months, you will miss a certain portion of people that have not been a deputy mayor in that first term. So that's something that we can take back and look at.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to make a brief comment as it specifically relates to start times, because I have heard some questions. You'll notice one of the changes we are proposing to streamline the agenda is to move to a consent agenda on certain items. So some of it will be agenda management, and so I think you'll see the agenda, hopefully, as we kind of get our feet underneath us and get more comfortable in the chairing roles and so forth. The agenda should move a little bit quicker, and so hopefully with that 1 hour start time, a little bit of enhanced agenda management, we should be able to get through those agendas. And some pre-planning. I think you're going to see, a senior management team, us look at agendas a year in advance on a monthly basis, that consistency, and determine what needs to come when. We are doing that now, but as you know, we have some meetings where, specifically around some of our committee of the wholes, where they're every other month, so sometimes it makes some of that pre-planning a little more difficult, but.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to speak, but I'm sorry, I don't know who all has spoken. So I'm just asking the question first, if I should stand down. Has everyone else spoken? Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think the clerk did a good job capturing a good deal of the direction that we wanted to move. So I have a few comments as well. The workload that we had in this past term was pretty heavy, and we are trying to move toward a more efficient process. So I don't have any difficulty with the committees. There's lots of choices that you can make. These all seem to be pretty good matches, and I certainly take the start times and some of the workload as areas that we may have to do a little bit of work on. The deputy mayor position, I can live with whatever system the majority of council want. I prefer the 3 months because I like being able to develop a relationship with the person. And it's also a matter of ensuring that the deputy mayor operates from the direction that policy is moving. It's not, and the council is moving, it's not a matter of individual preferences on things. The person that's doing it has to understand that the general trend of where things are going from a policy perspective is what we're representing in terms of the town. So there is some learning in relation to that. So that would be my preference. The date and time of meetings, if the council is going to be on the first Monday, I would prefer it not to be the last Monday, but the last Tuesday or Wednesday. So at any rate, maybe we can maybe other people have some additional comments about that. I was pleased to see that there is going to be a provision for citizen advisory committees, and I'll be interested to see how that all rolls out. The closed session, I had a discussion with the clerk about the closed sessions, and you know, this is all legislative, of course. However, the reports that come out of committee, I think, may require some assistance from the clerk in terms of what we're going to report to the public. And I find that as the agendas become more fulsome and we're going into council or to committee less and less in camera, that it's more important that we define what it is that we want to share with the public. It's certainly one of the areas that the region has gotten into some difficulty with. Under 23.7, and I forgot to mention this today in our conversation, Madam Clerk, the use of electronic devices. They're speaking about devices to record proceedings of a closed session is prohibitive. So I just need a little bit of clarification on this. I don't know whether this is, whether we've actually had a discussion about this at all. I thought that the Ombudsman was recommending that they be taped. Could we just have some clarification on that, Mr. Chairman?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the use of electronic devices to record proceedings of a closed session. Closed session is not filmed. When we go into a closed session, you will see a blank screen that we are in closed session. That is to inform the public that we have now moved into closed session, and we'll announce why we're going into that. But closed sessions are never filmed. There has been some issues in other municipalities where you may have a member record and leak information. So that is something that all municipalities are striving towards and moving towards, and putting that into their procedural bylaw to ensure that no electronic devices could record the proceedings.
And so, Mr. Chairman, through you, and I know you can hear me, so through you to Madam Clerk, then there is no requirement for us to tape the proceedings and to have that kept in the vault as per the advice of the Ombudsman.
So as the clerk's role, when we go into a closed session, the clerk's role is to record basically in minutes, written form, of what happened, to make a document and a true record of what occurred in a closed session. That is the recording of a closed session, and those minutes get filed away.
So, Mr. Chairman, through you, should we understand that some municipalities weren't doing that?
No, what was happening was you were having members who were using devices to record what was actually being said and leaking that information in terms of like a social media or whatever that may have been at the time.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm really curious now because it seemed to me that at least two major investigations where it was difficult for people to remember what had gone on and there was a whole lot of he said, she said circumstances. And it was my understanding that the Ombudsman was requesting that there be a tape made in order to make it much clearer about who was saying what throughout the procedures. What am I not understanding here?
So as a municipality, when we are recording these types of meetings, the closed session doesn't show to the public.
I understand.
What is happening is that we still are able to have a webcast in the background.
Okay.
But the record, if you want to say record, in terms of a device, an electronic device, whether it be a phone or a camera or whatnot, that's different. But as staff and as clerks, as we have to go back and review the video and do some editing in terms of taking out prior to the start time, people walking around, just doing that minor editing, that is something that we still have access to, but that's not something that we would release to the public.
Right, I'm talking, right, so there is a webcast, there will be webcasts in the future on closed meetings.
No, we won't be releasing that video to the public. Those will always not be shown to the public.
I'm not talking about to the public, I'm talking about for the purposes of an investigation.
Technically, yes.
Technically, yes, we will?
Yes.
Okay, when would we be starting that? Because I don't see that in this policy.
That's not something that I would have put in a procedural bylaw.
Okay.
That's not something that I, as a clerk, would add in a procedural bylaw.
Okay, so in the procedural bylaw, it says that we are not supposed to turn on any devices that would record proceedings of anything, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and we may decide that we're going to have what did you call it again? Webcast, that we may make use of a webcast in the future to record closed session minutes that would not be shared with the public, but may be shared for the purposes of an investigation. Is that right?
Madam Mayor, we always have that available. That is always something that is available to the clerk's department.
But do we use it?
We use it sometimes for extrapolating certain terms of minutes and making sure that we have written items down
For
correctly.
closed sessions, from closed sessions.
Yes.
I don't know how many counselors here knew that we were
Not technically, because technically we've been going into another room during
Right.
closed sessions. So what you did prior to my arriving here, I don't know if you had it in this room, but going forward, would it be in this room? Correct. But since I have been here, every closed session has been in another location, and so that has been in written form only.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Chairman, to the CAO, what does the future look like in terms of closed session meetings? And will we be having a discussion at some point about how we will be we will be going forward in terms of recording them?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think maybe the easiest way to answer that question is I think a lot of the recent investigations that the Ombudsman has done, and I've looked up a few just now, is that they're recommending to municipalities that there should be an audio or video recording of enclosed meetings of council, local boards, and or committees. It's a consistent line that they have in there to address some of these complaints that they often get that municipalities and councils are going in camera for maybe reasons that they shouldn't be going in camera. I think to Julie's comment, and I'm looking at our IT folks in the crowd, we have the ability to do those recordings. I think the policy or the stipulation within the policy was specific to devices like I'm holding up here that have the ability to record.
I see
They
that
can
now.
be, what I'm gonna say is, taken out of context or misconstrued or shared inappropriately. I think that's what the policy meant to capture. To
Right.
your question specifically, I think definitely with the new term of council and part of our orientation, code of conduct, and the review of all of those materials, we need to come forward and share whether we're doing that via audio, video, and what format we're going to be capturing those, so that there is a documentation. And to your point, it's captured somewhere in the vault should there ever be a complaint lodged against us, and we have to then supply information and be very specific on why we went in camera, why we didn't go in camera, and that type of conversation. But I think it is a recommendation coming out of the Ombudsman. I think we need to put some criteria around what that looks like and ensure that we have that. And I think as we go into the new term of council, that'll be something we look to bring back.
All right, so Mr. Chairman, through you, Mr. Kirkopoulos, should we understand that if a decision is made to do that, that there will be a report coming to council and that we will have an opportunity to discuss that, or is that an administrative decision?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the mayor. I mean, it's something that we would definitely be coming back to council for.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, for the confusion, but I guess maybe I've just heard these ombudsman's recommendations for so many months now that I really wondered where we were in the mix. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to look at 28.1. And I spoke with Madam Clerk about where the regional councillor and the mayor's report would be included in the agenda. And I'd like to note under 23.3 that where it refers to each member, it's my understanding that that includes the councillor reports as well. So, Madam Clerk, I'll ask you for the clarification on the mayor and the regional councillor reports under the agenda listing. Through you, Mr. Chairman.
So I will address the regional councillor portion of it. Since having arrived a short while ago, the regional councillor has not been somebody that has been seen to delegate to this council that I am aware of. And going forward, I did not make a placement on that due to the fact that you know, you don't really know who the regional councillor is going to be. You don't know what kind of relationship this council is going to have with that particular person. I know the mayor had mentioned to me today that there's other regional councillors that show up to other municipalities on a regular basis. From my experience, that would normally be under a delegation portion so that we have notice to the public of when a regional councillor is coming and what they are speaking about. That's where I feel that it fits. It's up to council if you disagree or if you like that as a standing item on the council agenda. The other portion is for the mayor's report. So as it's noted in the Municipal Act, it is noted that without note or comment for minutes of council. And so this is something that other municipalities do not have in their minutes, although I understand the mayor is looking to have this as a standing item. So I have left that out as well. I will leave that to council to have that discussion.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, my preference following the discussion with the clerk is that the regional councillor would be included under delegations as a matter of course. I'm hopeful that we will have a different relationship in the future and different expectations, and that the mayor's report would go under section I, which is reports of municipal officers, and continuing on with our current practice that if the report is to be noted, it's my responsibility or the mayor's responsibility to provide the report to clerks, and it's attached. And that's the only time that it would be found. Mr. Chairman, on to item number 30, the council information package. And it's clear that what the clerk's responsibilities will be, and I just want to state that I'm very much in favor of seeing a very strong and consistent showing in terms of the way packages are circulated to councillors, to make absolutely certain that the legislative assistant is continues to be available to council and does not fall into the habit of being pulled away for other responsibilities because there are other priorities going on. The major priority must remain the council and the business of council. And I would also, Mr. Chairman, take us forward to 36.1, where the role of the chair under rules of conduct and debate very much speaks to engagement. And some of the items here about people not leaving their seats, about making noises and disturbances, I may be a little more sensitive to this than I need to be, but the holding of private conversations amongst council members during the meetings, actually leaving the room to have sidebar conversations, the use of electronic devices during the meeting so that councillors can consult with each other on how they're going to vote. I would prefer not to wait for this to start to happen in earnest, but that we include some of these items under 36.1, even to a greater extent that they are in there, because I have seen all of these things happen, and once they begin, there just seems to be no end to it. There is a section under 39.12 that the clerk and I, Madam Clerk and I, spoke about, and I feel that this is an extremely important section. There, this issue of frivolous and vexatious behavior is becoming more and more common. The way the public engage with politicians and with members of the public, not only in municipalities but other public service agencies, is becoming a major concern. It's akin to having a conversation with a boxing kangaroo, and I think that, again, that we need to have some concern for this and some awareness, and actually we need additional assistance, I think, in terms of how to handle this, because once the wheels start falling off on these matters, if you don't have a plan in place, it can get out of control pretty quickly. Overall, Mr. Chairman, I'm very pleased with the procedural bylaw. I think the language in it is very good, and so those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Councillor Foster.
Just a couple of quick comments, and concerning the regional councillor situation, and no disrespect to the clerk, but you know, it was at one time a position where there was a lot of good input was brought back to this council, and in fact Jill Hildreth was the one that was the councillor at that time. That fell right off the rails with Bowsma when he was here, and unfortunately Bill, through a whole series of circumstances, it hasn't been a good term. And I've no clue about the other guy who's running against me, but I mean, I've already made it abundantly clear that the regional councillor must have a good working relationship with the council. So, you know, however that gets decided or whatever the case may be, I think that's important. I also, you know, all of this stuff is going in place, but you know something, I haven't particularly seen a problem with this council, and in fact I didn't see a problem with the previous council, nor the previous one, nor the previous one. And I know that there's an awful lot of pieces of the puzzle that are going into place here, but you know, just remember, this is council's procedural bylaw. This is not the clerk's, this is not the CAO's, this is council's. So be mindful as you're going through this in the next term of council. If some of these things don't work, change them. Talk about it. Make sure that it works for this council. If 2 questions at a meeting is not enough, talk about it. Go to 3. You know, like, just because you have these things in place doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be changed. And in fact, you know, you're going to find as you're going through this that there's probably going to be a lot of changes that you're going to want to make to this. This has not been an abuse of council in any way, shape, or form over the last number of years, and I think we could say for all of us we've been very good at this. But you know, just, you know, don't get it so you have people walking in with straitjackets on and not able to actually go and do their job as councillors or the mayor. I mean, you know, just be cautious of that as you're going into the next term with this.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to highlight a little bit about the process that we've been through, and I think we've had a number of meetings on this. These aren't easy topics to discuss. There's always, I think, the toing and froing that happens. At the end of the day, our goal, you know, was to look for efficiencies where possible. It was to ensure that things are appropriately captured, that our agendas are captured. And I agree with Councillor Foster. Things haven't run terribly. They haven't run bad. They've run well. You know, it is a toing and froing. There's always, I think, guidelines that we put in place. You'll see throughout the procedural bylaw, we do give discretion to the chair to allow additional questions and those sorts of things. So, you know, kudos to our legislative staff, Julie, Trish, their team for putting this together. Not an easy undertaking, a number of pages, trying to accommodate, I think, all of our collective needs. And absolutely, Councillor, I completely agree with you. This is not the CAO's or the legislative services staff's procedural bylaw. This is council. So if we need to make those amendments, we will. It is a fluid process. We are looking at where we can, aligning with, I think, what is municipal practice out there and making sure that we're protecting council and we're protecting from a liability standpoint where council is going to. That is our collective jobs, is to provide you that advice. So I do want to recognize the work that went in this, both from a staff perspective, but more importantly, the council committee that was struck to pull this together. It was a lengthy meeting, a lot of good, healthy back and forth, definitely. So I do want to say thank you.
Thank you, Chair Patriva. So just a couple quick comments. I agree with many of the comments. I think this is good work, this draft procedural bylaw. Whoever has worked on it, I think it's, for the most part, captures everything that we're looking for. Just a couple comments. If this is a report that we are approving this evening versus a report that we're just accepting, I do believe that we need to have some further discussion. So just for my comments, I really like the idea that through the clerk that we're going to get a proper training, especially for new councillors in terms of chairing. I do believe it should be inclusive. I do believe that everybody should receive equal opportunity to chair a committee, and I think it is the role of the municipality to provide that training. So I'm really glad to see that. I certainly would endorse and like to see some of the meetings starting at 4 o'clock. I believe the clerk has indicated other municipalities are going to some sort of a daytime meeting. So certainly, to be here till 11 o'clock at night is not something that I actually enjoy. So if we could start meetings at 4 o'clock and finish at 7 or 7:30 or 8 o'clock, I would embrace that. In terms of the deputy mayor, I think I'm probably okay with the way it's captured here, but if I had a preference, I would like to see it stay kind of the way it is right now on a quarterly basis. I think there's something to be said for that versus just sitting in as a deputy mayor for 1 month. So. Those are my comments. I don't know if we're going to have discussion if this is something we're going to approve tonight. I think the mayor made a comment earlier about some of the meetings not taking place on Mondays and moving to Tuesday or Wednesday. So I'm not sure where that discussion needs to go. Yeah. So deputy mayor, the 4 o'clock meeting or something that I would certainly endorse. Thank you, Chair Patriva.
You're welcome, Councillor Brunei. Councillor Renchima.
Thank you, Chair Pacharivas. So I think that we've heard a number of concerns tonight, or not necessarily concerns, but input that I think it sounds like a lot of us want to be able to think about things a little bit more before we make the final decision. And I don't know if anybody's got a running total of the concerns or comments. You do. Okay, that's good. Daytime meetings, I think it's going to depend on the next council. I don't think everybody has the flexibility. I do, but I don't think everybody does. And then some people in the next council may not have that flexibility. So I think that's a decision that has to be made when the next council comes forward. I like the 3-month deputy mayor thing too. I think everybody does. But thank you for going through all the work. Thank you to the councillors that were involved in this. It's an important exercise.
So,
hang on, one more, Mr. Chair, thank you. And that is, you know, I wholeheartedly support the regional councillor being a member of this council. You know, I think that we've got to make that councillor feel as comfortable as we can, and I would go so far as to suggest we have a chair in the round here for the regional councillor. I think that relationship needs to be very strong. We need to know what's going on at the region and vice versa. And you know, I see that person being a delegation, being an outsider. You know, I really don't like what has happened here this term, for whatever reason, and from what I hear, the last 2 terms, and I think that's a huge miss. That we need that regional councillor to be one of us and be working closely with us. You know, just the fact that they're here after a meeting's done and have these private conversations about what's going on and what we need to have happen, they're huge to move the agenda of this council. So I would absolutely support a change to that item to move to our councillor being on the council, our regional councillor. Thank you.
So before I read the question, so pretty much we've had unanimous consent to the, I want to say vice mayor, but it's not vice mayor, that would be in China. The deputy mayor, that position is a 3-month term, and we rotate that, and we had chatted about that, and so, and then the others, you know, we can chat, and I think going forward, you know, the timing, whether it's 6, whether it's 5, whether it's 5:30, I think there's that to and fro, like Councillor Renchima said, you know, based on who's sitting around, you know, next term, and we have that. And Councillor McPherson, you know, you made that really salient point there that you're having it once a month. You should be able to plan. You should be able to plan around that. That okay, it's 5:30. So, you know what? Maybe if there are a lot of you know, people have that flexibility, go in an hour early that day, get my jazz done and come out. And the other point too, that was very, very prudent and very cognizant was the regional councillor. You know, the regional councillor is I think is a second intermediary of council. They need to know what we're thinking, and we need to know what they're thinking. And we need to help them move their agenda forward, but at the same time, they need to help move the town's agenda forward. And we've been lacking that for the past 12 years. I mean, you go back, you know, 2 terms ago, and I think it becomes very undermining at the region when the mayor and the regional councillor from the same town vote opposite. So they're not in step. And that's because we haven't had that repartee. And I like to see it, you know, going forward as an opportunity to nurture, to help, to guide, to have that to and fro. What are our burning issues? Because the mayor's one voice there, but this is another voice that we really haven't taken advantage of. So I think that's important that they're, you know, they're inclusive, we talk about openness, we talk about transparency, we talk about inclusionary. And only because it hasn't happened doesn't mean that it shouldn't happen. And it can. Going forward, we have that commitment. So, Mr. Kirkopoulos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So can I suggest for council consideration that we defer this to October 1st? We hear what council has said. We come back with some of those tweaks. We hear you on kind of start times. Let us come back and maybe have a few conversations on that. I think the 3 month is loud and clear. We can put some wording around the regional council specifically. There's things that are dictated under the act. I mean, I think I understand exactly where I think Councillor McPherson was going, but you know, we've got to examine some things and put some wording around closed session, voting, all those sorts of things. And I don't think that was the intention, but rather it becomes an integral part of this council in terms of providing information and sharing information back and forth. So let us go away. I think we've heard the intent of what council's desire was. Let us put some specific wording in terms of the act and so forth, and hear some of the conversations that you had today. So some friendly amendments and friendly additions, I think, just to provide some additional clarification if council is supportive of that.
Okay. So CS 1806, the procedural bylaw update will be deferred to the October meeting. So I've got a little sticky note here that PL 18-51 will be an additional closed session item. So I'm going to look to the clerk to give me this motion. All motions from this evening's meeting will be presented to council for final approval at its meeting of October 1st, 2018. So we have a motion moved by Councillor McPherson and seconded by Councillor Renchima. The committee adjourned to closed session in order to address A, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board as it pertains to a review of surplus town-owned lands as it pertains to Report TR 18-22. B, personnel matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, as it pertains to PL 18-51. All those in favor? And that is carried. But before we jump right into that, would you like to have a 5-minute recess to stretch your legs and go to the salle de bain and such? Now we have a motion moved by Councillor McPherson and seconded by Councillor Renchima. That report TR 18-22 regarding the review of surplus town-owned lands be received as information, and that a communication strategy be developed to communicate with residents and neighbors prior to any sale process, and that staff begin the preparatory planning work required to begin the disposition process. All those in favor? And that is carried. And we have a second motion moved by Councillor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Timmers. The report PL 18-51 be deferred to Q1 2019. All those in favor? That is carried. And it's still on the docket. Are there any councillor inquiries this evening? Or inquiries? Councillor Foster.
Oh, there we are. I had a commentary come back to me from a citizen today concerning our internet voting. And I know we have these 2 special sessions that are coming up to talk about, you know, the process and stuff like that. But they gave me a really obvious question. Why aren't we doing some sort of an online tutorial that they can make use of? So I just leave that back for staff to think about, because again, not everybody's going to be able to make it to either one of those sessions, and maybe people are going to want to know a little bit more about how to actually make use of it. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Yes, I would like to follow up on Councillor Foster's comment, because actually that's what I've heard as well. It would be nice to have an online video of some sort in order to walk people through the step-by-step screen clicks of the process. Fairly easy to set up, and hopefully we can accommodate that. Thank you.
I see no queuing. Notice of motion. Are there any notices of motion? Are there any announcements? There being no further business, I declare this meeting adjourned. You got it. Trish, do you want these? No, thank you. Do you want this?